What's up, guys? This is going to be a completely different format for a YouTube vid. So I'm actually going to record this as a YouTube vid straight from Twitch, but it's likely going to be a longer form video. So what I plan to do here is go through the process of going through the rankings and my thoughts, as opposed to making it more structured. It's going to be a little bit more less structured, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in like certain sections of video, chapters and whatnot in the description below. So if this video ends up being, I don't know, 40 minutes to an hour, there's just make sure you go to this section that applies to you. So what I plan to cover today is saves, armor saves, especially with the release of Grima. That is a very important topic I want to touch on here. Going to talk about the Grima banner itself, the new units there, what they mean to the game, and of course the upcoming homoforms. So this is going to be quite a packed video, and I'm actually going to go through the process, and you guys are all going to catch it on YouTube. For those of you that don't come to Twitch streams, I've gotten some demand for clips from Twitch to basically go there, but it's going to be a pretty long form video because I'm going to go through the process and go through my thoughts. So yeah, let's go through this. If you do enjoy this style of video, please let me know in the comments below. It's not going to be as structured or as edited as the other stuff. If you like this like full form type video, then just let me know in the comments below. All right. Of course, Twitch is down there below me in chat to correct me for all the times I make mistakes, but also to add a little bit of flavor to the video as we go through this. This is where I'm going to start. I'm going to start by going through the save skills. And to really touch on this, this is my opinion, so you guys are obviously going to have different opinions. There's going to be plenty of people that are going to disagree or agree, and that's totally fine. If you want to make an argument for certain save units, that's okay. But I'm going to try to rank them into what I feel is the best saves in the game. I'm going to do 3 different tier lists here. An AR offense, an AR defense, and a Summoner Duels tier list rankings. So this is going to go obviously a bit extensive. I'm not going to put every armor on this list to start off with. Armors that I just don't feel are viable at all are not making this list. Like Winter Zephyl, don't expect me to talk about Winter Zephyl. And that's just because there's going to be better red sword armors that just do the job better. There are going to be ways to make a unit like this viable. Obviously, like an arcane sword from Lif is going to make Winter Zephyl pretty good now. Or Zephyl himself if you don't want to use his weapon. Okay? So with that in mind, just because I don't talk about a unit doesn't mean they're completely unviable and you shouldn't use them. But this is going to definitely be a more higher level analysis for units that have preference weapons, such as BK, of course. We did just get Grima and Fjorm, so like this is going to be more focused on some of the more recent, or well, I guess BK is not recent, but with the arcane weapon, that's that's relevant to talk about. So I'm going to be talking about all these units here, and I think the best way to start this is actually talking about AR offense for save skills, because I think most people enjoy Aether Raids, or at least if you're a part of this channel, you likely enjoy Aether Raids. So we're going to start off just flat out telling you what I think of new Grima, though I will talk about her more later, and she's just straight up in S tier. Amazing unit. The neutralized armor bonuses should not be thrown around as lightly as it is. And as an air offense save unit, she's going to just be up here. She can run near save or she can run far save, and she's extremely good. So if you've been wondering where Grima is and how good she is, she's good. She deserves to be up here easily. And with that being said, of course, Adun and Vector himself, wherever he is, there he is. They're both easily in the top as well for both near save and far save. If they can run both, they have some flexible builds. They just deserve to be up here, and nullifying their armor weakness is a big deal. Now, the Grima and Adun scenario is that they actually have dragon weaknesses, and I think that's fairly relevant. Whereas Vector does not have a single weakness, it's pretty much just infantry. So that alone puts Vector just in a very solid spot. The biggest issue with Vector, of course, is that he's so common that people are considering him as meta, and of course they're going to run into people who have Vector counters ready on their defense to try to take him out. But despite that, he's still very up here, and a lot of that has to do with Hardy Fighter. If really the counters for these guys start showing up more. They could end up being just a slight tier lower than somebody like Grima, for example. But for the most part, again, I'm starting with an AR offense ranking here. And these guys are just definitively up here, and a lot of people have to consider them when building their defenses. Now, I want to give a special shout out here to Ascended Fjorm. Despite being a year old, and I guess Vector is a lot of years old, but Fjorm is definitely up here as well, but for a different reason than these three. Now, Ascended Fjorm is amazing because she does something that the other armors, all of them, literally all the other armors don't do, which is Null C Disrupt. And this disrupts a lot of defenses, because before like Fjorm was a thing, you would have seen Selena from Fire Emblem 8, you would have seen Dazzle Staffs all over the place, you would have seen a lot of these Wind Sweep and Dazzling effects, and the existence of Ascended Fjorm just said nope, and now everyone started removing, and they're just not as common. I just don't see those effects anymore, and believe it or not, they're still very good to have to deal with the other top tier armors, because the other top tier armors have no way of playing around that. So Ascended Fjorm is a meta defining unit because a lot of defenses have to consider Ascended Fjorm's existence, and if you run like a dazzling effect, it's going to suck, or if you run a wind sweep or whatever sweep effect in general, it just kind of gets hard countered by Fjorm. So that is a problem, and these guys all deserve to be up here. This is where things get a bit interesting, and I would say that a lot of other armors just don't really break the S tier, but I will talk about them and where they stand. So I'm going to go through these like one by one. We might not even use all these tiers, just again, I'm willing to open and change a lot of this stuff. Now, as somebody who's a Tiki user, I think she's up here, but not up there. Tiki is a great far save unit, but I don't think she's going to be breaking S in terms of far save viability. She's really good if you do run into wind sweep, because of course that doesn't affect her. You don't really see water sweep, and having high speed is a huge advantage. But she's definitely not up here. I don't really feel that way about her. Despite like Doga having a preference weapon, he's probably down here, but with Arcane Sword he's much better. Hector I think is actually pretty decent, so I put him down here. Now again, a lot of this is not, I'm just ranking the preference weapons, and I'm going to try to ignore the ones that are not. And a lot of the stuff under like the S and A tier is very, very subject to change, and you might have a better experience. So like Amelia, I think she's up here because she's a fast armor. Arden, I think he's a solid A as well, potentially might even break something like S, especially with the new arcane weapon. I'm not going to touch these guys without the preference weapons. So again, Henry, Jacob, Crom, Robin, Tharja, just not worth really talking about. Alyssa, Zelgius and BK are identical here, and I don't even see BK. I must have removed him. There we go, BK. So BK is up here with Zelgius. Like, they're both very, very top tier. In fact, I might even put them S, but the lack of far save viability doesn't really put them up here. Fjorm doesn't run near save, but you don't really want to run, I don't think, BK or Zelgius with far save either. They're not really going to play well into a lot of stuff that has armor effectiveness. That's, again, pretty big problem. So I put them up here because speed is very good in this meta, so being fast is huge, and the reason for that is Brave Self. Like, strictly Brave Self on defense is a menace, so if you're using a near saver, in this case BK and Zelgius, especially if Brave Self runs Wind Sweep, BK and Zelgius do really well. Tiki actually, with now the Arcane Breath and a near save, does really well, so again, she's up here. And Vector and Adun actually struggle in this respect as near savers. They can't really deal with Brave Self all too well, while these guys in the A can, so that's why I put them up here. And remember, this is all air offense, but I'm considering both near and far save. So if a unit can run like both, they're going to definitely be up here. They're going to disrupt the meta in a lot of ways. They have low weaknesses. That's why they're S tier. Fjorm just defines like the defense meta. Despite her not actually being super strong, she has a lot of weaknesses. If you outspeed her, she has a problem. She gets hit with guard effects. She has a problem. She dies to a lot of red units. She's not actually that bulky. She's susceptible to like debuffs. There's a lot of problems with Fjorm, and if she wasn't having that null C disrupt effect, she'd probably be a lot lower. Like, that's really what defines her up here into S, and deserves to be up here. She does well when her situation lines up for it. Anyways, looking back at this, I do not like a lot of these F2P armors. I think they are pretty bad, and you probably should not be investing into them. The Hectors, both of them are pretty much the same, so you can just put them together. Grima with the Arcane Breath is not going to be as good as I think most people might think, because he's not a fast armor. So with near save, he's just not going to have a good time against somebody like Brave Self, and Brave Self is definitively going to be in a lot of defenses, and if you can't deal with him as a near saver, then that's pretty bad. And of course, far save, if you're green, if you can't deal with duochrome, you're just going to suffer. It's just going to be a bad time. So green is very, very difficult to run as a near saver, and I think the only real good green near saver would be somebody like Lucina here. So Valentine's Lucina. We skipped down a little bit for that one. You could probably also make a case for Brave Edelgard, who's somewhere over here as well. She's chilling. There she is. Not B, A for sure. Might even be S. I don't really think, though, because of the duochrome existence. And we're probably going to start seeing Volke due to Hall of Forms. People will probably pick them up. And that's going to cause a lot of problems for the green armors as far savers. So because these guys are not really good as far savers, I can't put them up here. I just can't. Like, they're not going to have a good time being run as far savers, especially into duochrome. That's actually one big weakness of Fjorm as well, but again, No See Disrupt just makes things a lot comfier. You can definitely run stuff like Fallen Shield with Distant Counter Dragon Seal, so somebody like Nagi, for example, but the problem with Nagi is she's not likely to get good kills. Her Fallen Shield is such a big hit on your stats that you can get out of a unit, and the seal also taking Distant Counter Dragon is a bit of a problem. Like, these units just will not be able to get kills. So I do actually think Nagi is a very solid unit, but they're not going to be breaking the S. Their matchups and their weaknesses just don't really compare to these four up here, and that's why these units are hanging out in the A. There's a lot of good armors and a good bunch of units you can invest to. With that being said, though, I'd probably put Kajal up here in S, and I'd probably put Canagus up here in S to join the really good armors for far savers. They easily, especially if you're running like hardy fighter builds, some of them like Kajal could probably get away with a special fighter build. They're easily up here in S, super strong refines, good units that deservedly are going to be up here. So yeah, moving on though, again, somebody like Ephraim is just not going to have a good time against Brave Seliph, and that just brings him down huge. Far saving, he's not going to have a good time either, because duochrome is going to be there, Volke's going to start showing up, so they are going to have some trouble. I can't even put Surtur here, unfortunately. He seems to be even forgotten, so sucks to be a Surtur user, because just totally forgotten as an armor. Harden could technically run Fallen Shield with his distant counter weapon, but despite that, he just doesn't really compare to these guys up here. I don't see it. I could probably even put him down here. He's just not really that good. His distant counter weapons seem to get taxed pretty hard in terms of the refine environment. Moving on, we did get a recent refine on Tiki. I think she's pretty solid now as a near saver, so it might be up here with the Arcane Breath and near saver. But the thing with Tiki is you really are in a terrible comparison here. Like, there's no situation where you want to use Fallen Tiki over Grima, neither as a far saver or a near saver. If you maybe have like a +10 Fallen Tiki, then you can be reassured that near save with Arcane Breath is pretty good. And her Raising Breath is also pretty solid. It's not that bad. I think in terms of refines, a lot of people didn't give it enough credit, but it's actually a decent refine. It's not terrible. It's hard countered by lulls and whatnot, but it's being like speedy is pretty good. Being a speed armor can be pretty good. And colorless is also amazing. That's one of the big reasons that Grima's up here and Canagus is up here, because you're not going to run into like Raven tones that really disrupt the color matchups, whereas if you use like Vector and Adun, you're going to feel getting shut down by greens. So Tiki's just in a terrible situation because Grima's just hands down way better than her in every role, and that's why Tiki would just end up being down here. But she's not terrible. You'd probably still have a good time using her if you already had her highly invested. Now, Myrrh is an interesting case. I'd probably put her in A as well. She is in a decent color. She can run this. She's pretty much like Canagus, but red. and Dragon, which is okay, but not really going to run like the near save builds really well because she's not going to have a good time against Seliph. And of course, in terms of far save, being red is not as great as being blue. And if you're not nullifying armor, so she'd have to use like Swollen Shield, you're probably going to have a hard time against duochrome, depending on what sort of duochromes you run into. So I know I'm going to say that a lot, but that really does define a lot of what you run into in defense. Some of the more prominent green threats you're going to see are for sure going to be like Dual Dogger, or maybe Ninja Korin, but believe it or not, like these blues up here can deal with those pretty well, depending on the builds you run. For example, Special Fighter Bonfire build can deal with Dual Dogger, so that's why Vector has a lot of flexibility. He doesn't even need to run his Hardy Fighter build to be that good. His matchups can be diverse across the board. Okay, moving on, we have Ephraim. I think Ephraim's actually up here, probably, but it's kind of, it's like bottom of S tier for sure. And the reason I think this guy's forgotten so much is because he's an enemy phase Brave. Now, an enemy phase Brave with blue is really good. If an enemy Brave Seliph doesn't run Windsweep, you're going to probably see the Windsweep variants, but if you don't run that, then Ephraim should actually take that matchup pretty well. And in terms of a far save, he's going to get chunked by stuff like duochrome, but because he has his Brave effect, he's going to kill a lot of stuff too. And he also has healing built in. It's a really underappreciated unit and Refine, and I think he's actually right here, like right at the low S, but he can run both far save and near saves. I don't even think the attack check is that hard to win because he has a solid base attack. I believe it's like 40, which aged pretty well. And with with decent support, he's really not going to have trouble with that. So Ephraim is an amazing armor, and he aged really well despite being quite old. Like he's definitely here. His armor weakness is going to hold him back, and some of his matchups are going to hurt against some of the green threats. But realistically speaking, he's not a unit that's going to be missing kills. So he's up here. Again, just a reminder, guys. This is all debatable. It's all my opinion. And there's a lot of things to go through here, so I'm going to definitely not give credit where it's due to some units, but for the most part, you can't really go wrong, like, let's say, using Grima over Fallen Tiki, or using Lucina over, like, Amelia, for example. Like, there's just going to be some situations where these are better, and this is currently, as the meta stands now, where you're going to have trouble with, let's say, Brave Seliph if you're near saving, and you're going to have trouble with like duochrome, Dual Dogger if you're far saving. And if you don't consider those matchups, well, it's not going to be a fun time. So yeah, moving on though, we do have, I want to put Winter Fae here actually, because she's probably going to show up in a Holoforms rerun soon, and with the Arcane Breath, that could be pretty good. Now, being a green armor that's not fast is a problem for near saving, and then being a green armor into duochrome can run the Swollen Shield distant counter situation. Still also not too great. But I wanted to just give a mention that she should be here because she's going to be likely running on Holoforms. She's not that great. I'd put her definitely down here in something like D. She's just not really going to have a good time. Mamori also has a similar problem, even though she just had a Forma run. Being green, not being fast is kind of, or just having some super stack Refine in the case of Brave Edelgard is just not a fun time. Green armors are just in a very sad place right now if your name isn't Ascended Fjorm, Lucina, or Brave Edelgard. So, feels bad. Moving on though, we do have Felicia, who I actually think is pretty solid. She's probably better than Amelia. I put her at like the top of B. But the biggest issue with Felicia is that she's probably missing the kills on Brave Seliph. Even because of her really bad attack stat. So that is an issue. Looking at some of the other guys, though, we do have Winter Sothis, who I think is actually up here in the A. And it'd be competing with Edelgard and Lucina. Now, I did end up simming a bit of Winter Sothis, and Winter Sothis is surprisingly pretty good into the Brave Seliph matchup. She is able to outspeed him. She has Sirius, which is seriously pretty good, as it does have healing built in, and it's a speed check damage, speed-based special with damage, which is very strong. She beats Brave Seliph pretty decisively, and that easily puts her up here. Lucina may struggle with killing Seliph, but she does have future vision, So that's a very good thing. Another benefit to Sothis is she does nullify her dragon weakness, which is pretty good. You can run this Fallen Distant counter if you run her with Far Save. I don't think that's really that great. She's still likely going to die to Duocrom, even if you nullify that weakness. But for the most part, she is going to be up here for near saving. She'd be S tier for near saving for sure, but for far, because she doesn't run too much in terms of far saving, she's pretty bad at that role. I can't put her up to S. So yeah, let's look at some of the other guys. Adun is not anything special. I can't really say anything interesting about Adun, so she's probably going to be down here and C with the rest. Refine did not make that much of an impact. This is all with air offense in mind. We don't really know where Dual Hector is going to land, so as it stands right now, he's not really that great. So I'm just going to put him here, but his Refine is coming soon, and he could just end up skyrocketing up to S for all we know, so it's kind of hard to rank him. Forsyth is absolute... Yeah. Absolutely not interesting. We do have Dual Marth, and I can't really say much for him, though he does have some speed, so maybe that's redeeming him in D. Again, I'm not really putting any of these preference armors here, non-preference armors, because they're just not really worth talking about. Flora is an interesting case. I do think she is serviceable as a far saver, especially since she lowers attack quite a bit. But I don't think it's good enough, so she'll just hang out with her sister here easily. Duma is not to be considered for air offense because you shouldn't be running Animal Mythics into air offense, so I'm not going to talk about him here. We'll save him for defense talk. And yeah, that moves into some of the other ones. I will talk about potentially some of the units here that had like a Hall of Forms run, so Ilyana is a decent example of this. And I would put her up here probably in A, maybe B. Both are potentially good. I don't know if she's actually competing with a lot of these guys in A, but she does have some viability as a far saver. Being blue is decent playing into duo Crom. It's not going to be that great playing into duo Dogger though, so I don't think she needs to be up here in A. Okay, and that leaves this guy, who's probably here as well. Yeah, probably here as well. Thornlance is not that interesting. You probably want to run like a Courtly Candle build, I think, with him. Maybe for some extra DR there. Let's see what else we got. We got... Edel's not saving. You shouldn't be saving with Edel. Adun doesn't have a Refine yet. Because of that, she's not really that interesting. So it's probably D. Gatry is, again, non-preference weapon. Got Felix. So there's obviously some of the stuff like Felix. Gustav is still pretty decent. I'd probably rank him up here in B. Though, again, as a near saver, he's just going to get completely shut down by Seliph. So maybe he's not in that level. It's probably down a bit. I know you guys might see a lot of Henriettes as being the initial far save unit, but she does get shut down pretty hard by Dual Crom, so I can't really mention her. A unit you don't see a lot is actually Fallen Edelgard with saves, and she's probably not too bad as a far saver, especially since she can run a Fallen Shield and retain her distant counter-ing through her weapon. But she's not actually as good as somebody like Canagus, because she's more of a player phase type unit. But she does deserve a mention being colorless and being able to run distant counter with Fallen Shield to nullify her own weakness. Especially with like a bonfire build, like you're probably still going to kill most stuff that way. So I'd still put her there. Grima is colorless, which gives him a bit of a nice advantage, but he's not really doing much in terms of distant counter stuff, like as far save and as near save, he's a bit slow. So I'd probably put him here with some of the slower guys. Rhea is more interesting though. I think I can safely put her in either B or A. She might be A actually. It's because True Dragon Wall is really good. She has build flexibility with like Fallen Shield, Distant Counter, Dragon Seal. True Dragon Wall is decent. You could even run Hardy Fighter. I don't think the Arcane Breath is worth subbing out for her True Dragon Wall unless you do run Unless you do run Hardy Fighter, in which case it could probably be interesting. What else do we have left? So, oh, we have Winter Manuela, who I actually think is up here, potentially up here actually in S. Being a fast armor with the arcane weapon makes her really good. I don't know if she's up there in S. She's probably top of A, similar to like BK and Zelgius, but she's definitely very strong for a non-preference weapon because she can run the arcane sword. So that is worth mentioning. Edel is also a very interesting option as potentially an S tier or an A tier. I can't really decide on that one, but both on far save and near save, she's going to have decent matchups, especially since she has that built-in DR. So I'm a little bit conflicted where I want to put her on air offense, but she's definitely here or here. I'll put her in S just because she's pretty good. At least I've seen her do some work. Robin, also solid unit. Put her up in A. And Duo Duma, who recently got released. I think he has some solid potential, so I'm going to put him in S, as being able to deny specials is really huge, so pairing him up with the right supports can very much single-handedly win a lot of games. He also has some build flexibility and an enhanced far save, so he's up here for sure. He can't really run near save, so that does put him, like Edel and Duo Duma are kind of like, I feel, at the bottom of these saves, but they are kind of like above the ones above here in A. I don't think there's anything else worth mentioning. Don't ask me about Mustache Man. He's just an inferior like Vector and a Dune, so it's just not really worth talking about. Like his stats are nice, but not relevant enough. So yeah, that pretty much covers a lot of these. I guess Surtur, Pirate Surtur, is worth a mention, and I think I'd put him up here with Rudolph and Gustav. Gustav is actually lower, but being blue, I think, is decent for Surtur at least. So I'd put him over there. I don't think I mentioned, forgot anybody else. Yep. I don't think I'd really mention anyone else here. So yeah, this pretty much is my far save rankings for air offense. Far save and near save, sorry folks. If you're not very good as a near saver, so obviously so somebody like Dual Doom, he could probably run near save, but if you're not good, then that doesn't necessarily put you up here. So for example, Grima is good near and far save. Hector is good near save and far save. Dune is good near save and far save. Fjorm is just meta defining, that's why she's up here. But she's obviously pretty terrible as a near save. She's not even that great as a far saver. It really does, she needs her situational lineup, as I mentioned earlier. And then you have Kajel, who also can run both saves, Kanagas, who can run both saves, Ephraim, who can run both saves, and Edel and Duma can pretty much run both saves, but would prefer certain ones. Then you have like speedy armors, who I think are very strong right now, especially as near savers, or far savers who can do pretty well in the right conditions. So that'd be like in the A tier, as you guys can see. With the B tier, it's just kind of you're outclassed by other stuff. So like Fallen Edelgard is outclassed by Kanagas. That's why I put him up here and her down there. And then yeah, some other stuff is why, like the Felicia and Amelia being fast armors is good, but they're outclassed by Shinon. So this. Moving down is just like the rest of the stuff. Don't invest in the F2P armors; they're not that good. So even with their preference weapons, they're just not that relevant. You could maybe build Doga with like an arcane sword, but at that point, like why, when you can just build BK, who's just going to do a better job and have build flexibility with Black Luna. It's just not, I guess you could save Grails and build Trog, but it's not really that interesting. Effie, even with a Resplendent, is not really that relevant. Maybe she's up, but I don't know. The bottom tiers aren't really worth it. So yeah, this is where I kind of stand on a lot of this stuff. Even with arcane weapons, it's not really going to change too much because everything just becomes a stat difference at that point. Now, I want to flip this around and talk about air defense a little bit, where far savers can be a lot different. So if we're talking, I'm going to save this as we're gonna do ARD as well. Okay, I think I just killed everything, but that's fine. For ARD, it'll make things a bit easier here. We're not even going to do like everything this time. If you're going to use armors on ARD, you got to be a little bit more specific. So the best ones are still going to be Hector, Adun, and Grima for sure. I'm not even going to really dispute those. Those are still going to be up there in S. But a big difference here is like you don't want to be using Ascended Fjorm on defense. She's not really that great. She's really, really terrible on defense. So I don't know if she's E necessarily, but she's not good at all. So I would not recommend her for defense at all. And notably, some of the other really good armors for defense is like Canagus, if you can set him up. He's very hard to break through, regardless of whether he's doing near save or far save. But the beast transformation conditions make that really tough. Edel is amazing as well on defense, especially post refine. Very, very difficult to break through. And we also have stuff like Duma being pretty good on defense now as a far save. Rhea is likely up here as well. Now, there is a big difference, though, in terms of Anima and Dark Season. So, like, the dragons are not going to be as strong because of Naga's existence, but they're not necessarily terrible either. Like, on that note, I don't know if I would actually consider Duma up here in S because of it, but I think he is a step up, so I will put him up here. Some of the other more relevant far or near savers on defense is actually like Tiki. Like Tiki with Raising Breath, I think is really, really good on defense. And the reason for that is because she denies a follow-up when you want to engage into her, but on your enemy phase when you're tanking her, she becomes an honest threat. So if you use some of the dragons, say as your own save skills, you're going to have some trouble tanking Tiki because of her effective against dragons. You don't really run like sudden panic into defense. And even if you did, her running like a unity skill in defense makes things extremely difficult to deal with her. So if you panic her, then she's just going to really benefit from her own buffs that you probably run on the team, and she has like doubler. So pretty good on defense. I think Tiki is underrated in that respect, so I want to put her up here as a mention. Some of the other stuff, though, for defense and armors, you really don't want to consider too much. As somebody who's used like Cecilia, I think I want to put her here as a mention. Cecilia, Jafar, Felix, and Ignatz, because they are like F2P investments. So I'll put them all here. But I've noticed that range armors have one really big problem. And their real big problem is no Hardy Fighter. They can run Courtly Mask and Courtly Bow, which is decent, but it still makes them get shred by lethality, Deadeye, and such. And being a range armor can contribute to nuking power, but generally speaking, I do feel like melee armors are in a better spot when it comes to saves on defense than the range armors are. I'll make a special mention of Tiki, again, since I use her myself on defense. She's not as good as these guys up here, but I do think she's decent, so if you do have her, especially since she comes with the far save, it's pretty good. I'm not a big fan of, let's say, BK on defense. He's not going to get the stats or support that he wants when you're using him on air offense, so I can't notably put him up here. And I will say that Arden is pretty good, though. I think he can have a lot of bulk on defense that doesn't need to be supported to be relevant, so he does deserve to be up here. Some of the other guys, though, are hard to rank. I think Ajel is pretty solid on defense. She's up here with the top as well. And the rest of the stuff is not too difficult to break through on defense. It's a very much smaller list when it comes to air defense versus air offense. And I wouldn't really suggest investing into anything else. Where is Jafar, man? I can't see him. I mentioned him here in the B with the F2P armors. They all have their own. There. Yeah. I mean, these guys, being range armor is just not as good as being a melee armor on defense. It's kind of like how I feel about it. And when I'm talking about stuff like Winter Celia, Felix, Ignatz, and Jafar, if you're somebody who has, let's say, like Lissa, or like Faye, Valentine's Faye, or if you have even somebody like Robin, though I would consider Robin probably up here, it still all follows the same weakness that range armors have, which is they cannot run Hardy Fighter. And that just really defines a lot of the potency of these units on defense. Okay. Dude, I think I did mention Halloween Myrrh. I'd probably put her up here. Don't think there's anyone else that deserves a mention. For the defense list, it's really much smaller compared to the offense list. Not really going to go into everything this time, but yeah, this is kind of like how I feel about defense. These guys are harder to break through. These guys are less like bulky, but definitely strong in their own ways. Again, tanking like Tiki or Fallen Tiki can be a pain. The range armors are nice because they add to firepower. So if you run into the Bridal Catrios with these, you gotta like respect these units. I've definitely lost a lot of tanks to them just nuking stuff. But in terms of breaking through them, they're really not that difficult. Fjorm isn't really not that great on defense. She's very easy to break through for a lot of units, and that's just because she's not supported usually on defense, and her weapon gives her no stats. She's obviously just weak to a lot of stuff, debuffs, just like she's just not that good on defense. She has, of course, her null C disrupt effect, and some people might be running like wind sweeps or sweep effects where that all matters. But generally speaking, I can't really consider Fjorm that good at all. I definitely use ranged armors over her, despite her having Hardy Fighter. The only one I kind of missed was probably like Winter Sothis and Nagi, but I don't actually feel they deserve to be on this list. Or Felicia or Flora. Again, I don't really feel like they're worth mentioning on this list at all. So again, I'm likely missing stuff here, guys. And again, if you feel like your unit is top tier, then just post it in the comments, honestly. But I don't really, these are the units that I know playing into them have given me some trouble, or using them myself, or just looking at communities and getting some feedback on a lot of this stuff. This is how I feel on a lot of these save units. And the last thing is Summoner Duels. Now, with Summoner Duels, it's kind of the same aspect on what is good and what isn't. The biggest difference for Summoner Duels is like Fjorm is up here again, and the rest of the units are, they look kind of like this. They look kind of like this. Because if a unit is hard to break through in Summoner Duels, it gives you an extra turn or potentially an extra snipe. So the bulkier or the harder it is to break through that unit, that is going to define where that unit stands in terms of Summoner Duels viability. Though there is something to be mentioned for some of the things I didn't list here, which is like Edelgard, who is very powerful, Osina, who can benefit from something like Harmonized Sonya, and Edelgard, who again is just really tanky, especially with the right builds and the right team comp that can really shut down some stuff. And yeah, I think that pretty much is how I feel about those. So it's kind of the same list for Summoner Duels. The bulkier, tankier the unit is, the better situation there are. Some are more team comp dependent. Like based on that, maybe Lucina et al. Would be more A as savers in Summoner Duels, but realistically, they are up here. Ephraim on defense, I wouldn't feel too strong about, and on Summoner Duels, he is more of a unit that'll kill something rather than be bulky, so he's definitely not up here. The bulkier the unit, or the more annoying it is, it's definitely going to be up here in S. So Summoner Duels doesn't really change much compared to what is like air defense. If you're using an armor on air defense, it's going to correlate pretty well to Summoner Duels. But if you're using some of the armors from air offense, they might not necessarily be that good in Summoner Duels. For example, someone like Winter Manuela is really good as a near saver in air offense, but I would not consider her good at all for Summoner Duels. Maybe for like near save, potentially, but even then, I'm not totally convinced there, because if you run into like Erica or Brave Crom, you're just going to have a bad time. So I wouldn't really put them up there. Some of the units, there's a lot more viability in air offense armors. There's a lot less viability for air defense, and even less viability for Summoner Duels. Some of these units, like in Summoner Duels, like I wouldn't even consider using Lissa. I use Cecilia, and she really is more of a nuker than she is someone that's going to kill stuff or absorb damage. Like, all the range armors really don't do well in Summoner Duels. Even somebody like Robin, for example, you just don't really want a range armor for Summoner Duels. You really want Hardy Fighter. Hardy Fighter, like, defines the Summoner Duels, and, like, based on that, you don't really want to use Edel. But there are Hardy Fighter Edelguards, which do a lot of work. So yeah, that basically covers my saves, how I feel about them. That is the short of it. There's so many units, so much potential you can run here. So again, feel free to let me know in the comments below. And I'm going to move on to the Grima banner. Talk about them right now. Okay, so first of all, of course, it's Grima herself. Now, as an arcane weapon, I don't actually think that the arcane Grima weapon is that interesting, guys. The arcane Grima weapon is pretty much the same scenario as the arcane sword. You want to give it to units who just want to do a certain role or have build flexibility. So I think Arcane Grima, to start off, in terms of an arcane weapon, is going to be good. Like, all arcane weapons are going to be good on dancers, for example, or seasonal invested units that are just outdated. So if you are a person who's invested into the new Nils, then he would appreciate the arcane weapon because it's going to probably be one of his better weapons. If you invested into some old dragon that is never going to get a refine from like 2017 or 2018, and the arcane Grima weapon's going to be pretty good. Or just, of course, outdated refines in general. Or giving build flexibility. For example, Noe has like distant counter, neutralizing penalties on her weapon, and it like increases her special acceleration. You could switch that up for the arcane Grima weapon. You can run distant counter Dragon Seal, and that makes her just more of a menace. So it really is about reviving some old units and potentially giving it to units who either don't have refines, never going to get one, or dancers or something like seasonals. Like, that's how I stand about all arcane weapons that come out. It is just a stat comparison in reviving the old stuff. For me personally, it's not that interesting. I think, like, I've already got Grima, and I've given near save an arcane Grima, the weapon, to Legendary Tiki, and I think that will do me some good just because I use Tiki a lot. But realistically speaking, I'm not here to talk about Grima as the breath or the inheritance, but realistically the unit itself. Now, if you just saw what I was talking about in terms of armor and saves ranking, I think Grima is an exceptional unit, and most of that comes from Dragonhide. Dragonhide has neutralized armor bonuses. As soon as I saw this, I was like, I don't really care that she has an arcane breath. What I care about is this is like a very, very powerful unit. If Vector and a Dune are anything to go by, a unit that has neutralized armor bonuses as a save unit or just a tank in general is a big deal. And to only add upon that, being colorless means that she's going to have very good matchups across the board. They're going to be pretty even. She's not going to get shut down by greens, if let's say the Vector or a Dune matchups may struggle with. So they're just going to be even across the board. Her weakness is, yes, dragon slaying. And I think Deirdre, the new Legendary Deirdre, and Legendary Julia, especially if they're on like Bridal Catria comps, are going to give a bit of trouble for Grima for sure. And that's where Vector would shine more, because he doesn't have any weakness at all. I guess he has a lance weakness from like Sheeta, like Legendary, not Legendary Sheeta, but Summer Sheeta, and I guess the young version of Sheeta as well. So those weaknesses are relevant, and what really matters here is that Grima's a very solid unit, comes with Hardy Fighter, near save, and is a great far saver on top of that. And because of the way the rearmed weapons work, the inheritance chain, you can fodder like far save to her. You can then give far save to another unit, or you can give Hardy Fighter to another unit, or you can even give the Arcane Breath plus those if you give it to another armored dragon, for example, in the future. So in terms of Grima, she doesn't really need to do anything. She already has a good kit out of the box. And if you wanted to improve anything, it's really just a matter of giving her far save and Aegis and steamrolling a bunch of content in the game. I'm not going to talk much more into that because I think most people should understand really quickly why Grima is so powerful. Now, next up is Air on this banner, and Air is worth mentioning for a couple of reasons. Air is, if you don't really recall what her weapon does from the Tempest Trials, it's pretty much a up to 20 bonus attack based on your allies' HP, and she also has like a self-null follow-up effect where she's going to guarantee her own doubles. Those are all decent, but at the end of the day, where Air is going to find some utility is going to be on Air defense if you still run cav lines, or if you are interested in something like Chaos. So Air is in a slot that is... I don't feel like it has much competition, especially as a physical damage dealer. The other notable cav units on Air defense right now are still going to be like Ascended Legyarn, who can do a pretty similar role but colorless and with a bow, and Ninja Corrin, who hits magic with a Brave effect. That's pretty much the only competition in terms of a similar role to what Air does, and both of those are for different reasons. So Ninja Corrin has that Brave effect with magic damage, whereas Legyarn is pretty similar with colorless. So I'm not really sure like where Air would fit in there. I guess if you don't have Ninja Corrin, you don't have physical damage. If you're going to run her on Air defense in a cav line, whether that's in Chaos season, or you don't run a Bridal Catcher team, then Air can fit in pretty well. But realistically, beyond that, she's not as relevant because cav lines are... well, they're not the worst defense comp, but if you don't run a Bridal Catcher comp, or if you run one, then Air has no appeal to you. So in terms of this banner, like Grima is completely going to outshine Air. Grima is, of course, not in the permanent pool. As a rearm, they kind of just hide. They're just gone. Whereas Air is in the permanent pool and she could just spook you later. So yeah, not that interesting. The fact that she comes with Mystic Boost 4 though and Sparkling Boost might deserve a mention. It's not Sparkling Boost 2, which is significantly better, but Sparkling Boost 1 could be decent for Air defense specifically, just because you'd end up giving your team more staying power. It might not be the greatest thing, especially when combined with like feuds, or compared to feuds rather, like C feud or B feud, which would be probably better, but Sparkling Boost could give your team some staying power and annoyance. Mystic Boost 4 is worth a mention here, as it is a sort of null C disrupt against staff users, but the problem with that is it's not really going to be one to be used by anyone. Like, I don't feel most units are going to want to use Mystic Boost 4 in their B slot when you compare it to fighter skills in the terms of armors, and with infantry units it's like no follow-up or some sort of speed DR like Spurn or Frenzy or whatever. Like, all those ones are just kind of going to outclass Mystic Boost 4. The only character I can think of that might want Mystic Boost 4 would be Brave Seliph, to really like re-roll his miracle effect over and over again. But it's just it probably would find the most use in something like Summoner Duels, if anything. Mystic Boost 4. Yeah, and the other units on this banner were Gregor, who is just kind of whatever. He really is kind of whatever. I guess you could use Solid Ground to give it to like Mila, and then that's going to help her with defense checks for isolation. I guess he's pretty tanky, but yeah. There's not really there's not really much to say here with Gregor. Another Red Sword Infantry is just what it is. He is some sort of support with his weapon, which gives like a column debuff, and I believe a row debuffs to help your team a bit on both phases, but realistically he's not even worth a mention. And who? Yeah. Anyways, moving on. That's pretty much our banner. Now, the next part I want to mention, talk about, is the Hall of Forms, which is featuring Shinon, Volke, Ilyana, and Jill. So start with Jill here. And if you're a Jill fan, if you're a fan of any of these, then obviously you don't even need to listen to this part because you probably are going to pick them up regardless of what I say. But if you want to know how useful they are, then at least I can help you with that. Jill is not very relevant in the current meta. If you wanted to use her, then you probably are going to be running some sort of Wings Gale Force build. That's pretty much the best you can do, I'd say. I think her weapon was Slaying, if I recalled correctly, which is okay, but yeah, that's pretty much what you're going to do with her. That's the only way I can see her fitting into the meta. You're going to be picking up rare skills, and this is obviously the time to try to find those. We don't have anything like attack speed finish yet, which is unfortunate. Could run something like attack speed oath, I believe, is in the pool here. You could even get some of the holds now. Select speed defense hold for some support. I believe attack speed catch is still ideal for something like the A slot. You could even run blade session if you don't have any Subasas. Pick up heavy blade 4. These are all things you'd want to synergize. The B slot obviously is not going to be Wings of Mercy. You could even run Tempest, I believe, in the C. This is fine too. Both of the Tempests depend on how you run. Some of the flows are pretty decent to pick up, such as Flow Guard. And she's going to be initiating. Something like that could work. So yeah, that's kind of where you put Jill. But really not more you're going to do out of that. It's probably the least interesting here other than Ilyana. I guess Ilyana's also fairly... not that one. Fairly... like, not worth talking about, but at least the cool things about being an infantry is you can pick up stuff like Canto Control, you can pick up stuff like attack speed of 4, which I think is really good. You can pick up B Feud, or Blue Feud. You can pick up C Feud. These are all really cool things to pick up if you wanted to use her, let's say, on defense. She's not going to have that many options, but I do feel like it's just kind of a worse Renea, because Renea was the more relevant thing. You can pick up attack res tempo, that's pretty good. Attack speed unity, it's pretty good. And unfortunately, there's no finish, so you could also get attack res finish. We don't have attack speed finish yet, but attack res finish could be pretty good. So these are all like very premium, very recent skills to make a unit that I think it could be a good unit in a year or two when she does end up with a refine. Of course, you want Ruptured Sky as a special, and then like the best tomes here will just end up being something like Love Bouquet to support the team. I think this is still very solid as a weapon. We do have Drifting Grace for the attack and speed and a little bit of healing. And I believe there's also Spooky Sensor for like a Fury effect that could help with Wings of Mercy follow-ups. If you're going to build her, then like Air Defense and a Bridal Catcher comp is the way to go. And this doesn't look too bad, especially if you wanted to fill like a Canto Control role. Like I don't actually think this is terrible. Easy to merge up, can be pretty good. So if you go max, then yeah, without the Summoner support, this could be annoying to play against. You could even run... I wish there was like an armor effectiveness tome that would make it way more interesting, but yeah, not worth ignoring. Next up is the more interesting options, if you ask me. So we have Shinon, and with Shinon, he's a bit outdated by today's standards, but he does have a very unique bow, which has close counter built in, and I believe it's also 4 stats as long as he's solo. So as an air defense unit, he's really not going to be that good. But if you wanted to use him on defense, he does have access to White Cap Bow, which is really good. And of course, Instant Bow. Now, or even Fire Sweep Bow. Like you do have some really good bows you can use, with Instant and White Cap being like in the Grails, so you don't even need to really pick that off for us. So you could end up picking like Fire Sweep Bow. But as I mentioned during my save rankings earlier, Fire Sweep is a lot less relevant because of Ascended Fjorm. But nonetheless, you could have him pick that up. He already comes with Deadeye, so you really don't even need to fish for that. You could just end up with Ruptured Sky. You can run a lot of the same stuff that makes a good unit on defense. So like the Canto Control, you can pick up Tempo now, Speed Defense Tempo, for example. So these are all like rare skills you can pick him up, and later he should get a refine. I believe about a year from now he'll likely get something. So if you're a Shinon fan, then you can build him the same way that Ilyana was. and have a lot of fun there. His weapon is very good as well, so you can run some close counter tanking strats with omni tanking. If you combine him with, let's say, Kaden, then he's going to be able to run kind of. He's going to have an open A slot to get a lot of stuff out of. Again, you still likely want to tank with Unity, run Kaden with him, and then run like the null follow-up, and he makes a pretty decent tank that way because of his close counter and having the A slot there. I wouldn't really use him over a lot of other stuff, but it can be done. Again, if you're a Shinon fan, then that'll help. And finally, I think what most people are probably interested in, including myself, and I'm interested in Shinon as well, so I'm going to have something special built up for him for the stream experience. But if you are pretty surprised by Volke, I'm pretty surprised as well. Now, Volke has like a kit that's already really good to just throw onto defense and call it a day, but it can be improved based on what your defense is missing. And what I'd say the win there would be, it's just improving some of the stuff you pick up. So like Ruptured Sky, if you get the Kanto weapon that Seasonal Soth had, if you didn't end up getting that, that's pretty nice. If you use them anywhere outside of air defense, just having it is good. And then the A skills, you just kind of improve some stuff like attack speed Unity. I wish attack speed finish was in the pool, but it won't be at this time. So Unity, in my opinion, is better than Impact. At least I think so. Impact is decent, but just being able to punish people who run like Panic Manners or debuffs in general just makes Volke and any real nuker on your defense much more threatening. He doesn't even need a tempo, so his B skill is quite flexible and you don't even need to really worry about it. He has tempo built into his weapon, so you don't even have to fish something out of the B skill. You could go full meme here and pick up like Sudden Panic. You could pick up Pulse Tie, whatever. Odd Pulse Tie, and have him run like support plus nuking. I don't know. The most optimal B skill at the end of the day is going to be lull speed defense. But I think that one is fairly common as fodder, so you don't really need to pick that up. And you can just go like full meme and just pick up something else like Sudden Panic and whatnot. Yeah, he even has like Wind Sweep with no follow-up, as Twitch chat just mentioned under me. Like these are all fine builds. He has a lot of build flexibility, but none of that is really rare. So the things you really want to aim for is just kind of like Rupture Sky potentially, attack speed Unity to improve impact. And then the C skill is where the most interesting options lie. Of course, Canto Control, if you don't have that in defense, is really good. The feuds are, in my opinion, very good as well. So like C feud can deny Elamine, can deny Flame. And with Grima now being a thing, that can also very much be relevant to have his matchup against her. Blue feud you cannot run, so don't run that one. That's for somebody else. Attack speed 04, of course, really good. So yeah, I'd say Volke is a solid candidate, especially if you don't have dual prom and you wanted some very strong nuker. And with lethality, he really does sim very well. Like he doesn't need to pre-charge his lethality. If you have some infantry pulse on the team, you pulse him up, and he's going to be able to cut through a lot of the armors with Bridal Catchera and lethality, and it is nearly unstoppable. There's only a couple scenarios where you can stop him because he does have tempo in his weapon. So because of that tempo, if he's charging his tempo plus acceleration, mind you, so he has if he charges his lethality, pre-charges it to like 2, 1, then it's very, very difficult to stop him from absolutely steamrolling or hitting very hard on a lot of units. A unit that needs to be well respected on defense and does some high nuke potential. So yeah, folks, that pretty much covers everything I wanted to talk about here in today's video. I know this is quite a long one, but I wanted to cover quite a few things and give you guys some content. If you did miss it, I did recently also invest into Grima myself, as she did fill exactly the roles I was looking for air defense, for air offense. I was previously using my Tiki in Earth Season, whenever it was Earth Season. So as you guys can see right there, and Ascended Fjorm as well. These were like my previous far saves, but a lot of them had some issues that I didn't feel comfortable using, and especially on air defense, I felt like because it wasn't Earth season, I was sometimes lacking in who I could use on defense, and I've been using Cecilia quite a bit for that, as you can see with the Anima Blessing. So yeah, I'm kind of glad to finally fill that role and not worry about future holoforms or hardy fighters myself, and trying to find somebody like Mur or Faye to do that. Yep, that basically covers everything I want to talk about in this video. I know it was quite a long one. If you do like this format, please let me know in the comments below. This is quite a long and big one. I know it's a bit overdue, but yeah, we'll do it again. If you enjoyed it, just let me know your feedback in the comments below. And that's it from me. If you enjoyed the video, the best way to do it is throw a thumbs up and watch it straight through. Big thank you to all my Patreon supporters, my Twitch supporters, and you guys still watching on YouTube. Much love. See you all soon. Peace.